drama as a genre often uses sound to reinforce its narrative, which can be done through dialogue, music, and atmosphere. In Euphoria, however, sound is used differently. Rather than reflecting reality objectively, the series uses narration and sound design to place audiences within the character Rue Bennett's psychological perspective and shows the use of metadiegetic sound. This essay will explore how Rue's acousmatic narration encourages audiences to emotionally align with her perspective, while the show's sound design immerses viewers within her psychological experiences. From the opening moments of the pilot episode, Rue's narration establishes the subjective perspective of the series. Before Rue fully appears on screen, audiences hear her voice explaining her birth and childhood experiences, setting the tone for the narration throughout the show. Because the source of the voice initially exists separately from the image, Rue's narration functions as acousmatic sound. This aligns with how Michelle Chion describes acousmatic sound, as the voice whose source remains unseen creates authority and omnipresence. However, Rue's narration is also deeply unreliable, which is made clear throughout.
It all depends on who you ask, and to be honest, I'm not always the most reliable narrator.
Her struggles with addiction, emotional instability, and disassociation complicates the audience's ability to separate objective reality from subjective perception. This means that the audience experiences the world emotionally through Rue, instead of objectively observing the events on screen. This unreliability becomes particularly visible during the character backstory sequences, especially Nate's introduction. Rue narrates an introduction for each key character throughout the series, many of which are her friends, which would imply that she knew these details about them personally. However, her friendship with Nate is limited in the series, making it unrealistic she would know so much about his backstory.
He hated being in the locker room. He hated how casual his teammates were about being naked.
Rue narrates Nate's childhood with confidence and authority, while the visuals use stylized cinematography, saturated lighting, and carefully constructed montage editing. Although these sequences initially appear factual, they are still being filtered through Rue's subjective perspective. Sarah Kozlov argues that voiceover narration guides audience interpretation by directing attention and shaping narrative meaning. In Euphoria, rather than objectively recounting the events, Rue reconstructs them through her own emotional perspective. The audiovisual style elevates ordinary memories into emotionally heightened narratives, and as a result, the audience develops what Murray Smith would describe as affiliating identification. Viewers align with Rue's perspective even when her narration may not be entirely truthful. This occurs because narration fosters an intimacy and restricted access to information, encouraging viewers to experience events through Rue's subjective framing rather than an external objective viewpoint. The sequence where Rue acts as a detective demonstrates how narration really can shape audience perception.
I was putting together the pieces of the puzzle.
Howard, let's roll.
I wasn't going to stop until I got the truth.
Here, Rue's voiceovers actively transforms the tone of the scene. Dramatic music, stylized editing, and exaggerated visual framing create an atmosphere of a crime thriller rather than a realistic drama. Rue's narration therefore controls not only narrative information, but pacing, genre, and the emotional tone of the scene. This demonstrates how narration in Euphoria functions audiovisually rather than just verbally. Although Rue's voiceover shapes audience perception narratively, the series' sound design communicates the emotion through sensory immersion. Throughout Euphoria, sound constantly shifts between diegetic, non-diegetic, and metadiegetic forms. At the beginning of the pilot party sequence, the music functions diegetically. The sound exists naturally within the environment where both the characters and the audience can hear it. However, as Rue becomes increasingly overwhelmed, the soundtrack starts to distort. Dialogue becomes muffled beneath bass, and environmental sounds intensify unnaturally, and the music gradually overwhelms the scene entirely. At this point, the soundscape becomes metadiegetic. Rather than representing objective reality, the audio reflects Rue's psychological experience. Visually, the sequence reinforces this through saturated neon lights, unstable camera movement, and rapid editing. The audience is therefore not positioned as a detached observer, instead the viewer assimilates Rue's sensory experience. This reflects Baudry's apparatus theory, where cinematic techniques position audiences psychologically within constructed perspectives rather than as neutral observers. The clearest example of metadiegetic storytelling appears during the All For Us scene sequence at the end of Season 1. Here, non-diegetic overtakes realism and reality. Just for your love, yeah. Give you the world. Labyrinth's soundtrack dominates the scene, while choreography, rhythmic editing, and visual spectacle externalizes Rue's emotional state. The sequence blurs fantasy with reality through almost impossible spatial movement, dreamlike cinematography, and synchronization between editing, rhythm, and music. Importantly, dialogue becomes unnecessary and music replaces verbal explanation as a form of psychological narration. The audience understands Rue's emotion not through exposition but through rhythm, sound, movement and image. This demonstrates how Euphoria prioritizes emotional realism over objective realism. The series is less concerned with what reality looks like than how emotions feel and how that is put across to the audience. While Euphoria often uses overwhelming sound and music, the withdrawal scene and argument sequence in Season 2 demonstrates the opposite approach. During Rue's intervention and escape sequence, non-diegetic music is dramatically reduced. Instead, the sound focus is on breathing, footsteps, shouting, and environmental noise. The absence of music becomes emotionally significant. Without stylized scoring, the audience is confronted with Rue's physical and emotional vulnerability.
Fucking phone down. Where did you put it? Where'd you put my pills, Mom?
Where did you put it?
Get out of my way. Get out of my way. I'm calling the police.
No, you can't. You can't do that.
You will not attack me in my own home.
I want your own home.
I raised you. I did, okay? And you do not fucking scare me.
The handheld camera work and harsh diegetic sound creates exhaustion, instability, and panic. This sequence therefore creates a simulating identification. Rather than simply sympathizing with Rue emotionally, audiences experience fragments of her sensory reality through audiovisual emotion. Through Rue's acousmatic narration and expressive use of metadiegetic sound, Euphoria transforms television storytelling into a deeply subjective psychological experience. Rue's narration guides audience interpretation and creates affiliating identification, while the series' immersive sound design encourages audiences to assimilate her emotional and sensory perspective. By blurring boundaries between diegetic,
My fucking best friend? Like, what the fuck?
non-diegetic, and metadiegetic,
Hey Lord, you know I'm tired.
Euphoria demonstrates how sound and image can function not simply as storytelling devices, but as extensions of character psychology itself. Ultimately, the series prioritizes emotional realism over objective realism, using audiovisual style to immerse audiences within the instability of Rue's perspective.